Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So my friend Leanne back in Pennsylvania, for her boyfriend, she bought a bass guitar off of Musician's Friend. And she asked me if she could send it to me so I could set it up and then ship it back to her. And I was like, I guess it only takes 10 minutes to set up a bass, assuming that there's nothing majorly wrong with it. Usually when you buy a brand new guitar, this is a Mitchell. Doesn't matter what kind of guitar it is, unless it's some kind of a custom made thing directly from a luthier, or if you're purchasing it from a shop that has actual luthiers working there that set the instruments up before they ship them out. It's always a good idea to get your brand new guitar or bass guitar sent to a luthier to have it set up before you start playing it, just to make sure that everything's working well and everything's set up correctly. So let's open this thing up and hopefully I can show you guys how to set this up on your own. That's kind of the purpose of this video. With minimal tools, you probably just need like an Allen key, maybe a truss rod key, depending on what kind of guitar it is. Anyway, let's open this thing up and hope you enjoy it. I'm gonna try to keep this box intact because I still have to ship this back to her. So these Chinese made instruments are usually always shipped in these triangular, trapezoidal, parallelogram shaped guitar boxes. And that's just how it is. It's the cheapest way to do it. Okay, I can see some things that we can do to this to make it better already. It does come with Allen keys that we're gonna need to set it up. The first thing you wanna do is make sure the guitar is tuned to pitch, and then you can begin the setup. And we're always gonna start from the headstock and work our way down. So that way we know we have a starting point already. So let's go up here. Always start at the headstock and work your way down to the bridge. First thing I'm gonna look for, I'm gonna wiggle the tuning machines, make sure they're not loose. Sometimes they're loose. On the back, you can see these little screws. Sometimes they're not all the way in, sometimes they're missing. You also wanna make sure there's no gap underneath the tuning machines, between the wood and the tuning machine. You wanna make sure they're seated all the way flush. Of course, you're always looking for cracks. These scarf joints tend to break. This is like the weakest part of the instrument, like right in here, right in here. So always take a look at that. Of course, take a look at the entire guitar. Make sure there's no funny finish issues. Like this one here, you can see that this body was glued together at the factory in China. And when they finish sanded it, they didn't do a very good job because you can see the seam right there. Right there, you can see the shadow. And that's gonna go all the way through. You can't really see it here, but the rest of the instrument looks okay. So anyway, back up to here. Next thing we're gonna do is make sure that these nuts here are tight. So this tool here is not necessary. You can use a pair of needle nose pliers. I just don't like using these because you can accidentally slip and damage the finish on your instrument. But this little tool here, I'll link it below if you want one. This allows you to make sure these things are tight. See, that one's moving a little bit. You don't want to crank them down. You just want them to be not loose, right? All right, that's pretty much everything for the headstock that you have to worry about when you're doing a setup. Next would be the nut. So the nut, we want to make sure that the height of the nut is correct. So right here, you can see the shadow under the first fret. So right here at the edge of the razor blade, you can see there's a shadow on the fret from the string, and that shows us how high the nut is. A couple different ways you can measure this. The way that I determine if the nut is too high or too low. First, I'll check if it's too low, and that's easy. Basically just pluck each string in the open position, and if it buzzes up here, I should say, to be more specific, then your nut is too low. And it seems like we're okay. We also want to make sure it's not too high. So if the nut is too high, the problem is physical fatigue of pressing it down. But most importantly, if the nut is too high and the string is that high up off of the string, when you press it down, that note is going to be sharp, right? So just by looking at it, I can tell that that small amount is okay. On a guitar, you don't want to be that high. You want to be even closer. The next thing I'm looking at is the fretboard itself. You can see it's super dry. We're gonna have to oil that, but we'll do that towards the end of the setup. Just take your fingers and run them along the edges like this. If you feel any sharp edges, we wanna knock those off. Or if there's like a sharpness, like you can see there on the tip of my finger, right there on the tip of my finger, it did scratch a little bit. There's a little scratchy part like right there, and I'll show you how to fix that. The other thing we wanna check on the neck is the relief. So the best way to determine if your neck is straight, you can either look down it, which is like holding it here and then looking down the neck to look for that little bit of relief, that curve. You can also use one of these things to give it equal pressure on the back. The way I do it is I'll put one finger here on the first fret, holding that down. I'll put my pinky, the very last fret, and then I'll take my index finger and I'll push down on the 12th fret. So we're looking at this shadow right here. Keep your eye on that. So when I press down and then I press down with my finger, that tells me, and there's a little bit of a curve. So that's what we're looking for. It could be straighter. I'm gonna go ahead and try to straighten the neck a little bit and get rid of some of that relief. Ideally, though, you'll be able to fit like a thin guitar pick in there. I forget the measurement. I think it's like a 32nd of an inch or something is ideal. However, I do have guitars that have perfectly straight necks and they don't buzz at all. So that's kind of the point. You want to make this neck as straight as possible without creating any buzz. Put all of your parts in a little container, otherwise you're gonna lose them. And then your truss rod's inside here. Just get that with the Allen key. 2 quarter turns, so like a full half turn of the truss rod. We'll tighten it that much. That is gonna straighten the neck out. If we would turn it the opposite way, it would give it more relief, and we're looking to straighten this neck. So I turned it basically a half turn towards me, tightening it. It's a little bit better, not much of a difference. I'm gonna go ahead and give it another half turn. That shadow there is less than it was before. Not by much, but we don't need much, right? So now the next thing, basically after every time you change a setting on this thing, you move the truss rod, you change the saddles, you do anything that would change the tension of the strings, always retune it, and then we're gonna check the action, make sure it's not buzzing. So let me retune this real quick. All right, so right now I'm tuning it using my strobe tuner. It's up to pitch. However, listen closely, you can hear a buzz right there. Was not doing that before. So we're gonna go back to where this was. So apparently this thing was set up correctly from China. So we'll go ahead and we'll put that relief back in the neck. The only way to get this neck any straighter without buzzing is to completely do a fret job. I don't think it's the frets themselves. I think it's the fingerboard underneath that isn't perfectly straight. That would mean taking all the frets out, leveling the fingerboard, re-slotting the frets if needed, and then reinstalling the frets, re-level crown and polishing the frets. It's like a multi-$100 thing that you don't want to have to go through. It's playable right now, so I would not recommend doing that, especially on an instrument at this price point. So that's why I'm gonna leave it as is. All right, getting back to the sharp fret ends. Here you can see my fingertips. I was running them along. They're like little white scratches on the tips of my fingers, on the calluses. So for this amount of sharpness, we're gonna need a file. Go over to my fretting area. So this is my end file. And that should, you know what, we'll grab this as well. This is my little file. Now you don't need to buy special tools or anything. Most people have a file laying around. Even one of these, in a pinch, even one of these things would work. So being very careful not to accidentally touch the guitar body itself. What you can do is just take a piece of tape and just lay it there, just to make sure you don't scratch the body. So I have this thing and I have it at an angle, and I'm just lightly grinding any sharpness that I can feel. I also don't want to focus on a single one, because then you'll change the shape of that compared to the next one, and then it becomes very obvious. So if you do one thing, like say this one has a corner that's sharp, I'll file that around a little bit, right? But then you have to do the same thing to every single fret, just so they all look uniform, right? I mean, that's the way I do it. You may not care about doing that, but yeah, now I got to do them all. I'll be right back. All right, I really don't like using that thing. I'm just not used to using it. So this little file here is specifically for doing these fret ends. So I'm going to use this just because I'm much more efficient at using it. So basically I'm going to round over the edges of every one of these frets. Here's a little trick. Instead of taking the strings all the way off, just loosen the strings enough so that you can pull them all the way away from the fingerboard and then wrap them around the back. I like to use a piece of tape. All right, so now we're at the point where all of our fret ends are rounded over, and I can still feel a little bit of where I did the rough filing. So now we need to polish the frets. So in order to polish the frets, the way that I do it, I use this stuff here. It's called micro mesh, and it's basically cloth sandpaper in grits from 1500 up to 12,000. So obviously you start at the 1500. I like to use my fingers, so I'll just put it in between these two guys. When I'm doing this, I start off going left to right, and then I go with the frets to finish it off. So I'm gonna go ahead and run a time lapse of going through all these. First of all, let's take a look at the frets up close so you can see what they look like before. So you can see they're kind of dull, there's scratches and stuff in them. They just don't look good, right? That's what it's like from the factory. $6,000 is next, but you can see huge difference. Now we're going to let this oil sit on the fretboard for about 10 minutes, let it soak in whatever it will, and then we'll come back and wipe it off. Then we can put the strings back on, tune it to pitch, and we can start working on the bridge. All right, now that we have our everything from the headstock down to here complete, now we have to worry about from here down. So the first thing we come to is the pickups. All right, so I know it's not the most scientific way to determine the height of the pickups, but what I do is I'll press these strings down at the last fret, and then I'll take a ruler, one of these metal rulers like this, they're about that thick, and I'll wave it over top of the pole. And as soon as the pole catches it, the magnetism, I know that's where the pickup needs to be. So I could actually bring this pick up a little bit because it doesn't catch until right about there, which is just not even 1/8 of an inch below the string right there. So I'm going to raise this pickup up a little, and that one seems to be okay. So we'll raise this up just a turn or two, and we'll do the same thing for this pickup back here, and that one also seems to be good. So we just needed to raise this pickup a little bit. Next is the bridge and the saddles, and that's it. Now the next step is to lower these saddles as far as humanly possible without making the bass or the guitar strings buzz when playing in every position. So I'm always going to start off just by playing it now to see if it buzzes now, because if it buzzes now, it means it has to come up. If it doesn't buzz, we'll keep lowering it and playing until it does start buzzing, and then we'll just raise it up a little bit. Okay, it does not buzz, so we're going to go ahead and lower this. We'll lower it quite a bit. Let's go three turns on each screw for the saddle. Now, again, like I said before, anytime you mess with the tension of the string, you want to retune it. It's buzzing right there, but let's tune it up to pitch. Okay, we're tuned to pitch. No buzzing yet. Right there. We got a little bit of buzziness. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise the saddle. We'll go one turn at a time. Into pitch. Again, we may have a high fret here, which may require some fret work, but I'm gonna go ahead and raise it up a little bit since the action wasn't terrible to begin with. Yeah, we got it. Okay, there it is. Now that I have this high high G string on a bass, we have this string perfectly set up. This needs nothing else done to it. Therefore, I'm gonna take this low string and lower it to the same distance that this one is. And then the two middle strings, I'm gonna adjust the saddles so that they are the correct radius. All right, so this low E is about the same distance as the high G. So now all we have to do is adjust the two middle saddles here to match the radius of the fingerboard according to those two end strings. Now, of course, tune it to pitch again. All right, so the final step is intonation. So I can't show you I have a strobe tuner, but it's actually an app on my phone. I'll show a screenshot of it here, what it looks like. Basically, what I'm gonna do with that is I'm gonna turn on the strobe tuner. I'm gonna set my phone right here. I'm gonna turn the amp on. And what I'm gonna do is I have this thing tuned to pitch, and I'm not gonna have it resting on anything. I'm gonna hold it in the playing position, but just for the sake of the video, pretend I'm holding it in the playing position. We're gonna hit the open low E. We're gonna tune it to pitch, make sure that the strobe tuner is perfectly still, and then we're gonna hit the 12th fret harmonic. If we hit the 12th fret harmonic and it's sharp, that means we have to move the saddle towards the neck. If we hit the harmonic and it is flat, then we have to move the saddle back. And that's pretty much how intonation works. And that is pretty much the final step. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, let me know. Please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.